But is it really true that Ecuador is the main base of narco trafficking to Mexico, to the US?
Well, yes, with these things, you never can be 100% sure, but it's definitely the case in the sense that Ecuador has become indispensable tool, an indispensable piece in the system that gives, facilitates all this trafficking, not just of drugs, but also people, wild animals, minerals. Everything is being taken out of Ecuador without control. And that's by design. um, Austerity policies applied by Lenin Moreno, and ever since, have
The predecessor of
man.
Daniel Noboa.
Yes, no, predecessor, the one who betrayed
Yeah.
Rafael Correa's voters. They elected him with the plan that to continue with the work of Correa and the Citizens Revolution and the more like social democratic left, if you will. And he betrayed all his voters and everybody else and sell out to United States. It's believed that he did so because they had some dirt on him, which, by the way, now is like even coming out. He's being called to trial and everything. There's much more evidence against him than against his predecessor. But I digress. The point is that he started this route of defunding everything. Before that, Ecuador was one of the countries that were safer in Latin America, and one of the safest ones. It was one of the countries that caught more drugs being trafficked. It was at the top. There's several communications by Interpol congratulating Ecuador for his work, and that's not just because there's one side or the other. That's because there was investment in the state, in the tools that are needed to control all of this, not just in the ports, but also economically, in the banking institutions. There was a very escalonated system of control, right? And the results of that were a country that was very much in peace and where it was not a prominence of drug trafficking. Although, if you listen to mainstream media, that's not what you're being told. You're being told, even Marco Rubio is telling it now, that it was Correa who started all of these, that it was the left to blame for all of these, and which doesn't hold up truly. And it's even more astonished because if you understand now, we made a report, it's called Ecuador, the Narco Cash Machine, that talks about some 5 cases. 3 were known, in fact. 3 cases of drug trafficking by Noboa Trading. It was a company that, despite it has the last name of Noboa, it wasn't sure. Nobody really knew who it was, that company, because it's a corporation, in Panama. So
Yeah.
when Luisa Gonzalez in the presidential debate, can you imagine? There, Daniel Noboa first to do a drug test. Like, let's do a drug test right now. Can you imagine if you're a candidate and you tell me this? I will go, okay, let's do it right now. I'll put my arm. Okay, let's do it right now. But he didn't do that. And what's even worse, he said she asked him about Noboa Trading, and I'm not sure he admitted in the presidential debate ownership or partial ownership, which was big. Like, anybody who kind of knew what was the case, the fact that he admitted ownership of that company was big, because that company had been caught 3 times that we knew up to that point, trafficking drugs in bananas to Europe. And when we started doing our investigation, it turned out that there was 5 times. So there were 2 more that we found out and added. So it's 5 instances where they were caught. 3 in Ecuador, but the other 3 were outside in other countries. And what that can happen if you're an importer, exporter, you're a big trader. I mean, that can happen to you. They can put some bananas or some cocaine in your shipment, and it wouldn't be out of the ordinary because there's so many, such a flow of containers on the thousands. And Guayaquil is the port where most containers go out of in Ecuador, if not all, and has no control. So,
and Guayaquil is also one of the most violent cities now in the Western Hemisphere, which it was not before these neoliberal governments came in.
Correct. And so what we need to understand is not only that it was the case, but the problem is like what happened after. Like, again, if I am a presidential candidate and you come in the presidential debate and tell me that my companies have been caught trafficking drugs with the bananas, I will go ape. I will go insane. I will go to the port myself and find a way to cut who did it to try to blame me. I will go ballistic. But he did the opposite. He completely silenced everything. He has somebody, that corporation has somebody who's responsible, whose job is to go to jail when these things happen, basically. So somebody who's kind of handicapped. So it's like, oh, wait, he cannot do this kind of deal. So, they get him to jail while they find out who he was, the real culprit and whatnot. But that never happens. So then they go and say, hey, well, this guy cannot be the one, just let him go. So they let him go and nobody gets caught. So basically that happens in the three cases. Not only that, the Noboa's party CEO was also implicated in a case of trafficking cocaine. They caught cocaine and guns and weapons. And like 3 days after the presidential debate, when this was brought to public attention, she was cleaned up, let go, by this specific GA, she has been at the helm of this process of lawfare. We had a famous interview with Atilio Boron where we kind of started talking about this for one of the first times.
Atilio Boron being the Argentinian political scientist and intellectual, he's kind of like their Noam Chomsky.
Yes. And we started talking about the Plan Condor. And that's when I really start paying attention, because I kind of was aware, but when he broke it down and we start talking about it, we realized that yes, it's a real thing. Right now in South America, there's a Plan Condor 2.0. It's for sure. And the plan is not to send boots on the ground. The plan is to use the mainstream media and the justice system that's corrupted or biased. And between those two, use that and weaponize that to target the opposition, in this case, the workers, representation, however you want to name it, whether it's indigenous or urban worker, whatever party that's more in the nationalistic or workers' defense, they will target. And that's the new Plan Condor. It's just more subtle.
Right. And so here is, well, I put on screen while you were talking just a mainstream media report from USA Today, as mainstream as it and corporate as it can get. But cocaine keeps showing up in banana shipments in Europe. Those are Bonita bananas. That's the family company of the Noboas that made Daniel Noboa a billionaire child of Miami. Like, it just keeps happening, but no one is putting the pieces together. And the Trump administration helped him steal the election against Luisa Gonzalez, and Marco Rubio is there rubbing shoulders with him. And here's one of the only, I think, English translations of that debate exchange that you mentioned, Oscar, from your incredible report, which you can find at the Grayzone. Bombshell investigation exposes Ecuador government cartel conspiracy. This is Luisa Gonzalez, and to his right is Daniel Noboa, the U.S. Trump, basically the Trump employee.
To Noboa Trading. Drugs have been exported in banana boxes from the Noboa company, owned by Mr. Daniel Noboa, to Croatia and Italy. Drugs. So, the one making deals with you, or the mafias, is you, Mr. Noboa.
A que hoy lavan en los bancos dinero del narcotráfico que yo voy a combatir. Y le recuerdo que su familia también es banquera.
Let's talk money laundering. According to that same leaked chat, drug money is being laundered in banks today, something I will fight. And let's not forget, your family owns banks too. Now, let me ask, who is financing political parties and campaigns with drug money? You are. Maria Moreno, linked to drug trafficking, is president of your party and manages 9 companies within the Noboa group. Stop lying to the Ecuadorian people.
If I can quickly make 2 points about that. The second will be about the banking part. But the first one will be, we need to understand the amount of control they have. Daniel Noboa and the Noboa Corporation has over all this process. When we think about the Banana Republic, this is the laughable example. We're talking about a case where they have control over the bananas farms, the packing of the banana cases, then the transport of the banana and the storing of the banana cases in the port. Then they have control of the port, the ships, and they have control of the Ecuadorian army, the police, and the judicial system. So we're talking an absolute overall control. And the second point that I want to make is what she makes. She talks about they also have control of the banking system. And this is big. This, in the report that I absolutely 100% recommend people to see, to watch, sorry, we talk about this. And this is because between 2008 and 2010, the United States investigated Wachovia Bank because they bought the Casas de Cambio. And they use Casas de Cambio, which is little agencies where people go and change pesos for dollars and send pesos and dollars back and forth to the United States. They bought that so they can use that to help the cartels launder money and send it back and forth to the United States. They got caught and they were taken in front of Congress and investigated, and they were, being pointed at and being really loud talked to. And the lawyers stand up and say, "Hey, we are too big to fall. You better drop this." And they didn't drop it, and then he left. Then, this is my estimation, he went and talked to the clients, if you will, and they closed the key to send cash back in the system. At this point, I need to remind everyone that when you go buy drugs on the street, you cannot buy drugs on the street with a credit card or a debit card. You can only buy drugs on the street with cash. And what's the problem with that? The cash leaves the system at a constant rate, day after day, and that adds up. And the liquidity of the system reduces. So the system has to bring back that cash into the system. They have to find a way to deal with them and bring it back to the system, because when they don't do that, happens what happened in 2008, which is, the banks starting not having cash, start borrowing from each other. And that's one of the factors that unleashed that crisis in 2008. So now we have Ecuador doing the exact same job that Wachovia once did, but at a global scale, because part of the defunding of the Ecuadorian state by neoliberalism has been the defunding of the state agencies that control any of this. Can you imagine? They have the agency that they're supposed to have the dogs in the port to smell the drugs and stuff. They have a $5,000 budget for the year. It's like a joke.
Yeah.
And so same thing with the banking institutions and everything. So it's defunded, so it's not effective, and it's corrupt. So now, if you have dollars and you're a mafia man from anywhere in the world, all you have to do is take them to Ecuador. And then you will go back in the system somehow, some way. They find a way to get you going and send it back in the system. And that's with the acquiescences, I think, of the system. Because after all, we're talking about a state that has a deal with a narco traffic entity or several,
Yeah, the Albanian mafia helps them get it to Europe. They have connections with the cartels in Mexico. It's like all encompassing. Nicolas Maduro has even called this out.
And we hear about the cartel de los soles, but we don't hear about the banana cartel.
Exactly.
I wanted to the whole exposition that Oscar just made, which is excellent. Remind me something that a recent friend said. She's a young journalist called Sasia Alejandra. If Venezuela was actually doing such an extensive narco work, just like Oscar has just described regarding the Noboa dynasty, we would have been U.S. partners, not enemies. That's basically it, what we're seeing right now. But I want that you mentioned something, Max, that I think it's important. I want us to hear Oscar's take on this. But we can do that after the clip you're going to show, if you prefer.
Yeah, I mean, it's just to illustrate that this is, the U.S. media won't touch this. This is like bombshell material that should be on, and they all hate Trump. You want to embarrass Trump? Put this on the front page of the Washington Post or the New York Times. But at Miraflores, they're talking about it, and Maduro's talking about it. About the tour announced by the head of the United States government, the head of war, Marco Rubio, who's assumed presidential functions, threatens, undoes, and has Miami-fied foreign policy in the worst extremist sense of the United States towards Latin America and the Caribbean. Rest assured, he's not coming for anything good. And let's wait to see what new nonsense the head of the United States government, Marco Rubio, comes up with to talk about and what new war he starts. He's going to Ecuador. He should know that in Ecuador, the government he is going to meet, which was imposed through fraud, stolen election, sends 60% of the cocaine produced in Colombia to the United States, to his country. He should know that this president of Ecuador, Daniel Noboa, who's going to meet, works with the Albanian mafia and is a head of the drug trafficking mafia. Not the one saying it, the European Union says it. International organizations say it. Daniel Noboa's companies, who come from a banana exporting family, have been found to be trafficking drugs to Europe. They hide cocaine in the bananas, the certified companies of Daniel Noboa. Yeah, I mean, this is just like common knowledge in Latin America. How does Noboa get away with this?
Well, precisely, isn't Ecuador substituting the role that Honduras had during the first Trump administration? That's actually, I remember talking to you, Max, about that when the whole criminal insurrection happened and all the chaos that ensued. It was I said this is the overhaul for precisely shaping the country to turn into what Honduras was before Xiomara Castro arriving into office. But I would like to also to ask Oscar in this case, what's his take about it? I think it's a Jica clan, the Albanians that are operating in Ecuador. But they have been constantly appearing on each and every terrorist plot that has been foiled here in Venezuela. So it would be interesting to see what the Ecuadorian side can say of this. In this case, you, Oscar, of course.
Dritan Jica, it's the head of the Albanian mafia or the Balkan mafia in Ecuador. There's a big case related to this that pertains Guillermo Lasso, former president who was before Noboa and who famously said, if to get rid of Correists, we have to destroy the country, then we will destroy the country. And that's exactly what he did. He also signed a treaty, and this is another report we made that was kind of kept quiet in the secret, in 2022 with Joe Biden, in which Ecuador will begin to mutually collaborate at a much higher level, to specifically, and you look at the language of the bill, they do mention specific threats like narco trafficking and illegal fishing and illegal mining and yada yada. But at some point, they also mention negative influences from outside and inside the country. So the U.S. agencies were to help Ecuador on this, and so definitely Ecuador now is at a different level of an alliance with the United States. I'm not sure if it's at the same level of Honduras or how did it work specifically, but I do know that there is the language there specifically to fight internal negative influences. In this case, they're referring to the indigenous movement and the Correísta, party or movement, if you will. So that's what's been happening. You mentioned the fraud, the electoral fraud. We did that report. We carry on with the investigation. We have not been able to put it out yet because we just have so many things in the oven coming out. But that's one of those. And that's like almost unequivocal evidence that they stole the elections, because he was down from 6 points before 2 days before the election and ended up losing by 10 points, which is just not happening ever. And so now sorry, and you a little earlier asked how is Noboa getting away with this, and this is because the Ecuadorian justice has been weaponized to a ridiculous degree, and they have used the weapons of the state, the tools of the state to go after the opposition. And so famously, we did another report, you remember, where we uncovered a leak of chats. We were the first ones to get it, and those chats, specifically that GA, the general attorney in Ecuador, said that the Americans want Correa's head and they don't want the Revolución Ciudadana to go back to power. That's obviously because if they do, then the treaty they signed with Lasso will die and they will have to kind of de-escalate their ownership of Ecuador, but also because not only have the system and the justice system being weaponized to serve this faction against the other political faction instead of against the crime, but also they have the impunity of being, because Noboa is a very rare case. We used to have presidents who were hired or paid or financed by such and such, political contributions, and then they have to pull out the mask and who they really are, who they really work for. In this case, we know Noboa is the corporations. He is a corporate prince. He was not even born in Ecuador. He was born in Miami. He was born of a noble. It's like the local nobles, if you will. They're just businessmen that are, some have bad name, the way they got their fortune. But he is born in the lobby, and that's important. All these other countries that have been intervened by United States, like Venezuela, Syria, and these other countries, have been first lobbied inside Miami or other cities by the minorities, by the elites from said countries. So like the Venezuelan minority and elite is lobbying the United States so they can weaponize the country and go out, so same thing here, but to a degree that now the president of Ecuador is one of those who were doing the lobbying. The born in Miami,
Right.
His family is worth $1 billion. They own everything in Ecuador, and including Noboa Trading Company, which again was caught doing other stuff, and they also own the mining interest, which is very big, because the biggest problem they have in Ecuador is the mining conflict. And this is because the indigenous nationalities and the farmers want Ecuador, and most of the people want Ecuador to be a farming and in tourism oriented country. And that's what most people want. But a very small minority wants mining, like Noboa. And they have been attacking with the army and the state and the police, the communities, sometimes with paramilitaries, disappearing people. And these communities, funny enough, the thing is, like, people need to understand that these communities in Ecuador are different in the sense that they had one of the most advanced and progressive constitutions in the world, meaning if you want to do a project in their land, you have to consult them and you have to inform them and consult them if they want or not, and they have their protest to say, no, we don't want that project. But all that has been ignored. There are projects all over the country. When we went to do this documentary series in there, I visited all areas of the country, and they're basically a very big part of the country is under direct control of these mining companies. They control the police, they control the local everything, the local judge, the local newspaper, the local everything. They pay everybody, and they control de facto. That's not a legal control. It's just the de facto possession and control of the land in just to do, extraction of mineral resources, which is basically what they are there to do. This government of Noboa is not there to fix the country or help the country. Is there to extract minerals.